Now we will begin the final session from R&D to access and delivery, connecting for an end-to-end ecosystem. For this session, I would like to invite Dr. Ashley Burkett from PATH, Dr. Timothy Endy from CEPI, Dr. Lois Kikuai from Market Access Africa, and Dr. Omar Ndiaye from Institut Pasteur du Dakar. Dr. Isaac Chikwana from GHIT Fund will moderate the discussions. Isaac, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. We're going to change gears a little bit and move from R&D to access. We had in the morning from Mandip's keynote speech about the importance of access preparedness during R&D. And we know that without access, there's no impact, and without impact, all this R&D we've been talking about the whole morning is valueless. So my name is Isaac Chikwana. I'm the Director of Access and Delivery at the GHIT Fund. To help us discover the world of access, we have a distinguished panel today that are going to share with us different aspects of access. And to start us off, we have Ashley from PATH. Ashley is going to share with us to give us an overview of the different aspects of access from a product development partnership perspective. Ashley, you have 10 minutes for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Isaac. And thank you to GHIT Fund for the kind invitation to be part of this panel. We've been the fortunate recipient of GHIT funding and some fantastic partnerships over the last 10 years, a lot of those in malaria, which is very close to my heart. And it's great to be here today with many of the partners that we've worked with, including EMI University, Sumitomo, and Eisai, who are here joining today. So over the course of the next 10 minutes, I'll tell you a little bit about who PATH is, how we work to ensure that the innovations that we work on are accessible and achieve the impact that we're all seeking. And I'll share a few examples along the way of high impact innovations that I think demonstrate the ability to ensure and achieve access. And finally, I'll close with an emerging concern that I certainly have that I feel threatens the sustained impact of PDPs. So for more than 40 years, PATH has been a pioneer in the global health community. And we were founded on the principle that the expertise, resources, and innovations that are available globally really have the potential to impact health for all people. And people shouldn't be denied access to the benefit of these innovations simply based on the country in which they were born. So to this day, we leverage expertise from across all sectors to help achieve health equity globally, which is really our underlying mission. And you can see from this slide, we work across a lot of different categories. It's a complex working environment. We have a very large team, and we need a large team because we're tackling very challenging and difficult problems. And since we need to really understand the context in which we work, over half of the staff that are currently with PATH work in the countries that we're currently serving. So you've heard quite a bit today about PDPs, and I think you'll hear a lot of the same messages from me that you've heard from TB Alliance, MMV, IRV, and DNDi. And I think all of us really have decades of experience in improving health equity through research development and scaling different interventions. And for us, that's diagnostics, medical technologies, and vaccines, and ensure that they're fit for purpose for their intended use in low resource settings. And I think PDPs, we pride ourselves in accelerating the development of and access to these tools and really focusing on tools that really wouldn't have a high commercial interest otherwise, and breaking down those barriers of what we call broken markets to ensure that these products can actually get developed. And you've also heard the PDPs speak about the glue that really connects the partnerships. And I think that's a really important point of what we do. We work with all different types of partners across the value chain, and leverage our experience and our relationships of many decades to really maximize the potential success for your particular product candidate that you might be working on. So the product development life cycle is long and complex. This is what it looks like for vaccines, which is what I spend most of my time working on. And it's easy to think about this as sort of a linear left to right progression, but really that couldn't be further from the truth. And this is really where the PDPs, I think, add so much value. It's really, we have to begin with the end in mind. What's the ultimate goal? And yes, that starts with a target product profile, and you've heard a lot about TPPs, but it's more than that. It's about the ultimate use case and the value proposition for that intervention, including for the manufacturer. This has to be an intervention that makes sense for somebody somewhere in the world to actually make and sell and make a sufficient return on to make it worth their while. So we have to think about all of these things from the very beginning, and actually the path that we're going to take to get there. What is the clinical development plan? What's the regulatory strategy? What's the policy plan? How are we going to achieve a policy recommendation for this? And how are we going to introduce and scale it in countries that are often stretched in terms of their health systems? And as much as they like new tools coming, they often are stretched so thin that it's very difficult for them to take on new interventions. And so we need to provide the strengthening to countries as we bring these new interventions on board. So it's very complex, but as a PDP, we can certainly help product developers navigate this. So I've spoken about the glue, and I think this slide shows it really nicely. We position ourselves as maybe, as other PDPs would, as sort of at the center of this wheel here, where we're able to draw on, at least in our case, 45 years of long established and trusted relationships across all different sectors. So we start obviously often with the science and the research, and then new innovations coming out of academia, but transitioning those to product developers and often low-cost manufacturers in countries that can make these for the price that we need to make them to ensure that they're going to be available. The important role of global health institutions like UNICEF and Gavi. And then ultimately, once we get across the finishing line in terms of regulatory approval, making sure that these innovations and all of the information that's needed to ensure that the countries can make informed decisions on whether they want these tools to be implemented in their national programs. I'm going to give you a few examples here of some of the impact that we've been able to achieve at PATH with support from donors over the years, starting with some on the vaccine side. Polio vaccine that we worked on. Challenge with polio eradication is increasingly the reversion of the oral polio vaccines to actually cause cases. And so we worked for several years on a novel oral polio vaccine, which has a lower reversion rate. And after a phase 3 study that we led in the Gambia, has now been delivered to over 300 million people and really delivered on that potential for not being associated with the same reversion and having huge impact in terms of accelerating eradication. And we're working on other type 1 and type 2 variants of this now to have a broader impact in supporting the eradication agenda. Meningitis for many years caused devastation across the meningitis belt of sub-Saharan Africa. Much of that was from meningitis A, and health ministers really were calling out for a low-cost intervention to help combat this wave of meningitis. And we partnered with the WHO and Serum Institute of India to develop a low-cost 50-cent vaccine that is essentially 99 to 100% effective and has wiped out over the course of 10 years meningitis A across the sub-Saharan belt of Africa. That has also enabled Serum to develop the capabilities to make pneumococcal vaccines and now a 5-valent meningitis vaccine, which promises to have more impact. I've worked a lot on malaria, RTSS, the first vaccine against the parasite, the first new malaria innovation for almost a decade, is now being rolled out. Over 2 million children have been reached. We're going to have about 16 countries using this vaccine by the end of the year. And despite its modest efficacy, we're seeing pretty remarkable impact in terms of all-cause mortality, with a 13% reduction in all-cause mortality in the countries where the regions of countries where this innovation has been implemented over a 4-year period, which is pretty remarkable. In the interest of time, I'll just move to diagnostics. We provide analytical benchmarking services for manufacturers and funders, so we can test new both rapid diagnostics and point-of-care diagnostic tests to really enable informed decision-making on these tests and ensure that resources are going to the most promising new candidates. And then a very rewarding partnership that we've had with MMV. You've heard about tafenoquine, a key element of the success of that new radical cure drug for Vivax is the G6PD diagnostic that PATH worked on with SD Biosensor, which enables greater access to this innovative and very important new malaria intervention. So collaboration, I think you've heard over again, is key. We are available and accessible for new collaborations. We've had great success and impact with a range of different partners over the years, and really enjoyed the partnerships, particularly that we've had with Japanese academic investigators as well as pharmaceutical companies. Product developers should really be prepared to work in these complex partnership environments that we can help foster, to listen to the needs of the end user and make sure that we're delivering interventions that they actually want and will use at the end of the day, and importantly, somebody's actually going to pay for, because that's really critical to the manufacturer. Consider novel approaches to help strained health systems. Things that we're particularly interested in on the vaccine side are combination vaccines, so we can reduce the number of vaccinations that children require, and novel delivery technologies, such as microneedle patches, we see as having great hope. And then just emphasizing the importance of dissemination of information, including to countries, to inform decision-making about the new health products so that they can make informed decisions on their application to their particular environment. And then on my last slide, before I finish, I just want to highlight what I see as an emerging threat to the value of the PDPs. I think I must commend GHIT and your advisors on how you've embraced the PDPs. And I think we've seen that today on how you've really embraced and used the capabilities that PDP have to inform your investments with academia and commercial entities. But I think when the PDPs were formed 25 years ago, there was a lot of core support for them, which really enabled us to maintain that strategic vision. And I won't go through this slide in detail. You can see some of the implications that we see from the benefit of a world with PDPs and without them. But I think it's just really important to highlight that, without sufficient core support, it's very difficult for the PDPs to continue to have the impact that we really are seeking and that we've been able to have over the last 25 years or so. And this isn't a challenge for one funder to solve, but I think it's one that's important to highlight to funders and see if we can work together to ensure that we continue to provide the support and infrastructure that's needed to maximize the return on your investments in the global health space. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ashley. You mentioned something that really resonates with what we do at GHIT. You mentioned beginning with the end in mind. And this is something that often R&D innovators and R&D institutions take for granted. If you don't ask yourself those questions about how your product is going to get to the people who need it, then it can be a reason for delaying access to these products. And to build on this issue on the need for speed, we're going to hear from Timothy Andy from CEPI, who's going to share with us a little bit of how expediting R&D can be achieved. Over to you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Isaac. And thank you to GHIT for the invitation to participate in this really incredible day, being one of the presenters here and hearing all the wonderful work that GHIT's doing. Thank you so much. So I'm representing CEPI, which is the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations, and to talk a little bit about our organization and how we're addressing some of the world's issues for pandemic preparedness. In the next 10 minutes, I'd like to highlight CEPI's work on the 100-day mission and our commitment to that concept, how CEPI is working to expedite not only R&D, but also the access and delivery of pandemic preparedness response products, and then really how to leverage the learnings from the pandemics to non-pandemic technologies. And these are topics I'll cover in the next 10 minutes. The 100-day mission is really a commitment by CEPI. It's more than aspirational. We think it's a real objective. People ask, what is the 100-day mission? And our interpretation of that is that from the time of an outbreak recognition to have a vaccine available, designed, manufactured, emergency use authorized, and available to address a pandemic within 100 days. We've heard a lot about the product development timeline, from discovery to preclinical development to phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 testing, filing and review and manufacturing. And traditionally, this has taken between 5 to 10, in the case of vaccines like dengue, 20 years. And so these timelines and product development time points are really important to ensure that a vaccine is not only safe, but also immunogenic and protective. And these time points cannot really be changed too much if we want a safe and effective vaccine. However, COVID-19 really changed our concept in the fact that some preparedness involved with a design from MERS and its application to mRNA really changed the timeline so that there was emergency use authorization and licensure within 350 days, which was really incredible. Even under the best of circumstances, and in the scenarios that CEPI has planned in compressing these timelines, the best that we can do is 250 days. So how do we reach a 100-day mission? Well, it really requires a paradigm shift in the fact that we would have to prepare before a pandemic happens in terms of understanding antigen design, preclinical testing, vaccine platform readiness, and regulatory package before a pandemic ever happens. And to do that kind of paradigm shift requires a lot of planning, but also preparedness so that we can make the 100-day mission. If we had been successful in a COVID vaccine within 100 days, we could have prevented 8.3 million deaths, 1.4 billion infections, and 26 million hospitalizations. So the 100-day mission is an aspirational goal, but it's also a practical goal where we could avert many deaths and morbidity. And equitable access is the core to CEPI's vision. So CEPI's investments across the vaccine platform development are focused on key enablers of equitable access, which including supporting systems for equity in the outbreak and pandemic prevention, connecting with stakeholders because CEPI can't do it alone for system equity, making financial investments to drive equitable access to ensure that, that there is a cost of goods affordable, but also access for LMICs for these vaccines that are being developed. CEPI has invested heavily in the vaccine portfolio world, which includes vaccines against chikungunya, Lassa fever, MERS-CoV. You've heard earlier today for the broadly protective coronavirus vaccines, Rift Valley fever, and under Disease X platforms is the vaccine library concept, which I'll talk a little bit more about. Beyond R&D, though, the breadth of CEPI's vaccine work is really focused on end-to-end access. So CEPI has invested heavily in a manufacturing supply chain network, invested heavily in tracking infectious disease outbreaks. They've invested in Enable, which is one of the largest ever Lassa fever research study of almost 23,000 participants in Africa. CEPI has developed a centralized laboratory network to support vaccine development. They've invested in a preclinical model network of laboratories across the world for preclinical testing. They've invested with Brighton collaboration on vaccine safety, which is a very large network to look at and generate data on safety of various platforms remaining, and then a large regulatory affairs department. One of the things that we've invested heavily in is, and you've heard this earlier today, is in machine learning and artificial intelligence. And we believe that that investment will really take the pandemic response preparedness to a whole different level so that not only can we reach the 100-day mission, but we think we can even do it even earlier than 100 days. Starting from left to right, this includes a heavy investment with UC Davis in the spillover program, which is a machine learning, AI-driven 36-factor analysis of each virus and each virus family in terms of their likelihood of a disease X emergence. And we think that's going to be very important in understanding which virus families are going to be worthy of investment for pandemic preparedness. We've developed a very extensive collaboration of image and designers that are using computational analysis to design antigens, both B cells and T cell epitopes, in particular focused on stabilizing the prefusion trimer for vaccines that are mostly and highly immunogenic, to take these all the way through preclinical testing and then through phase 1 and phase 2. Collectively, this is our knowledge base from spillover to risk ranking of viruses, to image and design, through preclinical, to establishing vaccine platforms that have a regulatory package involved so that we can do quick antigen switching and testing for emergency use approval. This collectively will go into a artificial intelligence and supercomputer at Argonne National Laboratory that takes all the information so that we can design images very quickly. And this is an AI-driven program, what we're calling a pandemic preparedness engine, so that we can take and develop antigens quickly within days, that they can go quickly into a vaccine platform, optimize preclinical testing. And this pandemic preparedness engine will have all this knowledge that we've developed through our work as part of pandemic preparedness, so that from a outbreak and a sequence, that they would be automatically put into this engine where the spillover program will align it to a virus family and to a knowledge base that we've developed. There will be, within days, an optimized antigen constructed in silico designs, also optimized for preclinical testing, into a vaccine platform that will be optimized, whether it's an mRNA or a recombinant protein, and then through preclinical and clinical testing, all within 100 days. So this is our vision, and this is what we've been working on for the last several years. And I think using the machine learning and AI will be transformational in how we prepare for pandemics, but also how quickly we can respond to it. All these tools that we are developing and investing will be open to the Global South, so that they can also utilize a lot of these tools and softwares that we're developing to help for vaccine developments for their own countries. Thank you again to GHIT for the opportunity to participate in this wonderful conference, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Timothy. Indeed, for us to be able to achieve, the 100-day mission requires a paradigm shift. But I think the development of the COVID-19 vaccines showed us that it is possible. So one of the steps that could be a potential barrier to achieving this 100-day mission is regulatory approval. We know it is the gateway between R&D and access and delivery, and yet we know that it can be a gauntlet. So to help us, to tell us a little bit about how we can navigate the regulatory jungle, we have our next presenter, Lois Kikwai from Market Access Africa. She'll be presenting virtually. Lois, I guess in this case, it's not the floor is yours, but the screen is yours. Please feel free to share your screen. We can see it, but it's not in presentation mode. And you can move your slides by yourself.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here and present. As I navigate my screen to presentation mode, I would like to say it's a pleasure to be here. Are you able to see my screen now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, and you can hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you so much to GHIT for the opportunity to be here and to talk about one of the key aspects to market access on the continent for all of the development that is already going on with key partners. So today I'll be talking about the regulatory pathways that are required on the continents and what type of opportunities there are for developers and manufacturers to access the continent, and also for those on the continent to access quality medicines. My name is Lois Kikwai. I work for an organization known as Market Access Africa. And basically, our organization works with the public, private, and also third sector participants and stakeholders to design, deliver transformational health solutions for Africa. The organization has 3 major business units. There's the Global Health Business Unit, Commercial Life Sciences, and also Policy and Partnerships. As we try to make an impact on the continent, we have a nice coverage of colleagues and core staff across the continent. Our core offices are in Senegal, Nigeria, South Africa, and Kenya. That's where actually I am based. And we have core teams and consultants across the continent, therefore making our mission very easy to execute and implement. To the next slide. I work in the regulatory affairs practice, where I lead that practice. And as we have heard from the previous speakers, registration and regulatory registration and access of all of these products that will be impactful for the African continent need to go through a regulatory pathway. So in our mission as Market Access, we look at regulatory capacity building, and this will be key as I go through my next couple of slides. You'll understand why it's important to have regulatory capacity on the continent, operational excellence, and also we also provide the regulatory space with some designing and implementation of data system to manage the whole regulatory affairs package, both from the manufacturer side and also from the regulatory authority side. So in order to be able to market and also register on the African continent, there are some key points that we need to understand and to be able to take advantage of the opportunities. The first thing is understanding the landscape or the regulatory landscape on the continent. Basically, on the continent, maturity of the regulatory authorities is governed by assessment through the WHO global benchmarking. And just as a summary on the continent, all African countries except Sahrawi have national regulatory authorities or a unit that does the function of regulatory activities. There are no African countries that are maturity level 3. That's a high functioning regulatory authorities. We have 4 regulatory authorities that have maturity level 3 for medicines. And then we also have 2 regulatory authorities that have maturity level 3 for vaccine producing. This is Egypt and South Africa. And 95% of the authorities on the continent are either at maturity level 2 or even on a very basic level, maturity level 1. So this offers a lot of opportunity for improvement on the continent, where we have substantial room for regulatory enhancement, also in terms of the need for capacity building and upskilling, and also the need for harmonization across the continent. And there are several initiatives that are taking place. In terms of efficiency for the NRAs on the continent, the average time of product registration can range from 6 months to 18 months or even longer. The number of products registered range from country to country. So some countries have very high registration, whereas other countries have low or fewer products registered, depending on the demographics and also efficiency of their national regulatory authority. And in terms of inspections, which is a key regulatory function, we also find that about 85% of authorities do implement inspection, but to what extent and to what level, also that varies. And then also regulatory actions taken. We find that on the continent, this is not new information. We have a lot of substandard and falsified medicines. So we have a high number of recalls and also fines that are implemented. So in my previous slide, I mentioned that we need to improve how we regulate. And as a result, there's a lot of implementation of regulatory harmonization. Regulatory harmonization answers a few key challenges that we face on the continent. There's a need for speed. As I said, there's lengthy registration. However, with regulatory harmonization, it helps to expedite access by shared resources and capacities during the harmonization process. Additionally, because there's variation in the requirements of applying marketing authorization from country to country, regulatory harmonization attempts to address these challenges by ensuring that regulation, standards, and legislation across regions or even across Africa are aligned and therefore speeding up and addressing this challenge of time. The other issue as it relates to regulatory harmonization is the limited capacity of development of new technologies. However, we've heard from our partners on the panel already, there's so many efforts going on to improve and allow access for new technologies on the continent. However, regulatory harmonization tries to address this by working with partners to alleviate the need for and provide incentive to manufacturers to bring in these new technologies on the continent and have it accessible to the public. However, the theme and the agenda of regulatory harmonization has many things or dynamics that are involved. This means that there are several impacts for this dynamics. And on this slide, basically, we're going through the different dynamics and the potential impact. And what the outcome is basically the idea that we should have and prioritize the policy engagement issues so that we can have continued promotion and advocacy for harmonization, where it leads to an expedited regulatory pathways. So I'm not going to go through everything on this slide. However, I did want to mention some of those dynamics, which means there is now an intensified regulatory harmonization efforts through the African Medicines Regulatory Harmonization Initiative and also in the regional economic blocks, which I'll show in the next couple of slides. There's continued diversity of approaches in harmonization, so MOUs and different mutual recognitions, in addition to harmonization. There's also the establishment of the African Medicines Agency. There's intensified support for evaluating maturity level for regulatory authorities. So we see WHO and various partners coming in and helping to evaluate maturity levels for regulatory authorities, but also capacity build those regulatory authorities. And there's a move towards using regulatory fees to increase revenue for the authorities, therefore alleviating the capacity building or the human resources issues that we see, and also the authorization of the Africa Free Trade the Africa Free Trade treaties to allow for cross-border availability of products through strong regulatory and harmonization efforts. In the next slide, I'm showing an overall summary of what's going on the African continent as it relates to registration and marketing authorization. So if you want to access the African market, there are various pathways that you can follow. There's the national registration pathway where you may have a full review, reliance review, or recognition. There's the route where if you are registered in a stringent regulatory authority, there are different pathways that can be followed to be able to register your product on the market. And then I've already alluded to the medicines harmonization initiative, which follows a regional pathway. And then now there's the piloting of the African Medicines Agency, which will also provide another pathway to access the African continent in terms of products. The key takeaways from this diagram are the
Lois,
quality policies, speed, target countries, and then reliance and mutual recognition among authorities, capacity building, and also addressing various challenges, which could be opportunities and serve as advantage for new opportunities. The next couple of slides will be talking about specifically.
sorry, Lois, can you hear me?
Yes.
You are not seeing our timekeeper. He's just told me that time is up. So would you wrap up, please?
Yes. So in the next couple of slides, you will see a bit more detail on the national review process for access to registration. There's the AMRH and initiatives. This slide provides a bit more detail about that. And within the next 3 or 4 slides, you see the different regional AMRH initiatives on East Africa, the Southern Africa and the countries that are involved, and on the West African continent. So as you look at Africa, there are 54 countries, 5 regional pathways for registration, and also 1 continental pathway that you can access registration on the continent. So at this time, I will end my presentation, and I look forward to questions related to registration pathway for products on the African continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lois. A lot to unpack there. I think all of us cannot wait for, when we have AMA in place. But I just wanted to ask how many people in this room knew that we had a territory called Sahrawi Republic in Africa? No one. Thank you for oh yeah, there's one. Yeah, because you're neighbors. Thank you very much for that. Please stay online, on mute for the question and answer session later. So one of the positive things that came out of the COVID pandemic, if there's anything positive, is that it spurred local manufacturing and local production on the African continent. So our next speaker is Dr. Omar Njai from Institut Pasteur de Dakar. It's an institution that has been doing local production in Africa for decades now for vaccines and more recently for diagnostics. He's going to share with us how IPD has got to where it is now. Dr. Omar, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Isaac. Thank you to the GHIT team for extending invitation to us to participate to this incredible forum that is trying to address R&D for diagnostic assays. So I will be talking about the local manufacturing of IVDs, taking the case study of Institut Pasteur de Dakar via the Ditropics unit. I will just present myself first. So my name is Omar Njai, as you said. So I'm tech transfer specialist and R&D scientist at Institut Pasteur de Dakar. Next slide, please. So maybe just I will give a slight overview of Institut Pasteur de Dakar. So Institut Pasteur is a Senegalese non-for-profit foundation of public interest that have been established in 1924 in Dakar. So it is dedicated to biomedical research, to public health, to education, and also to manufacturing. So in terms of milestones, this is in this institute that the first yellow fever virus had been isolated, which led to the development of the first yellow fever vaccine. And also, apart from vaccine manufacturing, in terms of milestones, we have different activities like the setup of influenza surveillance in Dakar. In 2010, the institute was changed form. Before it was just a department of Institut Pasteur in Paris. In 2010, it became a Senegalese non-for-profit foundation. In 2020, so we expanded our activities by launching the Ditropics initiative for the Rapid Diagnostic Tech Manufacturing Facility. In 2023, so we initiated the high volume manufacturing for Ditropics, and we hope to integrate this facility in this upcoming week. Next slide, please. So what are the priority activities of IPD? So we have four main axes. So it's research, biomedical research, education, public health, and biomanufacturing. So IPD is more than 40 African countries that have been benefiting from IPD support in the fight against major epidemics like Ebola, COVID-19. We have been at the forefront of the diagnostics of these diseases. We also have 12 reference laboratories of IPD, nationally, regionally, and also worldwide. We notably house the WHO Collaborating Center for Arboviruses and Viral Emerging Fevers. We also have more than 80 years of experience in biomanufacturing, contributing to quality public health solutions and crucial innovations. We also have more than 70 scientific publications that have been released in 2023, strengthening IPD as a leader in health research. We also do a lot of partnership. We have more than 100 strategic partners that are collaborating with us in 2024 to build a healthier and most self-reliant future for Africa. So the priority activities that all of these are leading to is trying to fight antimicrobial resistance, to advance research on emerging pathogens, to improve diagnostics, to have modeling activities, entomology, mother and child health, and also biomanufacturing. So biomanufacturing, this is the topic that I will talk about in the next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah. So these are the new IPD flagship programs, because before we were mainly focused on just laboratory services, laboratory activities. And then recently we have some different programs that we have initiated in order to broaden our activities. The first one is the Mariba initiative, very famous. So it's a manufacturing in Africa for disease immunization in building autonomy, which has been launched after the COVID-19 pandemic, in which is aiming to build autonomy of African continent for vaccine manufacturing. We also have the Ditropics initiative, which I will talk about more broadly in the next slides. We also have CARE, which is the Center for Africa's Resilience to Epidemics in Dakar. We have the DAVAX, which is trying to advance the subunit and RNA and live inactivated vaccine. And also the CEDAR initiative that will enable life science partnerships and joint ventures for pharma companies entering African market. Next slide, please. So Ditropics, I will make now a presentation on Ditropics project, so maybe give a bit of history. So Ditropics came from an observation that we had regarding the health issue in Africa. We have seen that for most African countries, access to diagnostics for infectious and neglected and NTDs is insufficient or non-existent. And this prompted visionary partners, which are Fondation Mérieux, Foundation Fine in Geneva, Institut Pasteur de Dakar, and R&D, to come and put in place this collaborative platform called Ditropics. Next animation, please. With the goal to promote access to diagnostics through local manufacturing and innovative access model. So this is really the innovation here, trying to delocalize the manufacturing process in Africa itself through an innovative access model. Next. So the model we use, we call it the Netflix model, just like for movies. So actually, this is the breakdown of the cost of an IDT. So what we do actually, we Diatropics gives what you call a membership fee. If someone or a partner or government, for example, wants to have access to Diatropics folio, he pays for 60% of the price, that covering the operating margin and the labor cost. And then later, if a product is developed, so the price that will be charged to Diatropics member will just be 40%, which will cover the cost of goods and facility maintenance and equipment. Next slide. So this will contribute to really lower down the price of the manufacturing. So in terms of Thailand, so the infrastructure was delivered in 2020 after we were also certified by ISO 13485 to a version 2016 by the British Standard Institution. In 2021, we placed the first COVID-19 antigen test on the market, and then we received another funding from ACTE in order to expand our capacities. And in 2023, so we started transferring 5 products in within Diatropics. And in 2024, we are poised to inaugurate the high volume facility in Mbawa district, and also seek to diversify the portfolio. Next. In terms of manufacturing process, so we use the lateral flow technology platform because it's the one that we think is the more suitable for the African continent, because it's cheaper, it's more accessible, and more easy to put in the market and to use. So we have different products in development in the current portfolio. We work on a test for meningococcal meningitis, a test for yellow fever NS1, which will be the first RDT that will be developed. The measles and rubella IgM assay, which is currently being developed, with the measles one that is very well advanced, and it will be soon undergoing clinical trials. We also have an Ebola antigenic test that we're currently developing. So we only have one product on the market for now, which is the SAI2 COVID-19 antigen test. Next slide, please. So how we do the work at Diatropics, so we mainly work through technology transfer process, because the R&D part is often externalized because we have to build this capacity. It's not yet very well present in the African continent. So we partner with different partners like Bionode, Global Access Diagnostics, DCN, and Biomedia, but we look forward also to work closely with different Japanese partners for this R&D platform. And then after that, we do a technological transfer, verification and validation, and then the transfer is validated at Diatropics, and then we can do the scale-up and validation report before doing scale-up manufacturing. Next slide, please. So these are the manufacturing processes at Diatropics. So like in any other industry, standard industry, so quality control, formulation, treatment, assembly, packaging of the final kits. So all of this work is done through certification by ISO 13485 by the BSI. Next slide. So the current facility on your left has a capacity of between 2 to 4 million tests per year, which is quite low. That's why we had received a funding from ACT-A, from Fine and United, in order to increase the capacity to more than 50 million tests per year using the automatic assembly mode. So this facility has been completed and will be inaugurated next week. In IPD. So in terms of impact, so COVID-19 we had a huge impact using the SAI2 COVID-19 antigen test during the pandemic in Senegal and also in West Africa. So we want also to manufacture it for respiratory disease surveillance in neighboring countries. So there are current discussion to expand the current portfolio, and this we hope to have a lot of opportunities for Japanese collaborators. Next slide, please. So what are the challenges with local manufacturing? So the first challenge, I think what most of the intervenants have really sorted this out, is the regulatory roadmap, which is quite complicated because the regulatory roadmap in Africa is mainly tailored for vaccines and drugs, but diagnosis is quite new, so we're really trying to have a common regulatory pathway. And the second is the business model update. Right now, we're mainly focusing on neglected tropical diseases, so we'll need to build resilience with high volume manufacturing. Third challenge is the R&D, because we need a lot of talent acquisition, because R&D is not well developed in the African continent. We have to hunt talents in order to be able to hire them. We also need a lot of investment, a lot of money, and commercialization also. Supply chain also is really difficulty, because you have access to high quality regions, you have to order them from abroad, and there are some logistical nightmares sometimes. Next slide. So what are the opportunities for Japanese collaborators with IPD? Is that IPD is a unique ecosystem for medical products development. Next nation. So we have a one-stop show for product development and validation. So we have different capacities in order to be able to evaluate diagnostics assays by capacity building, by a lot of innovation. We also have a lot of observatories in One Health. So we can test animal samples, human samples, mosquito and termites. So we also have a syndromic surveillance system in order to be able to survey all of these assays. Next, please. So this model is applied in Senegal, what we call the syndromic surveillance system. So we want to expand it to West Africa through the partnership with ECOWAS and WHO. Next, please. Next, please. Okay, so the other opportunities are digitalization, biomarkers development, detection, and also multiplexing, which is something that is really interesting us. Next slide, please. Okay, I would like to thank all of the founding members, the financial partners, and all of the technical partners that helped us to navigate through all of these activities at Ditropics. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Omar. I know 10 minutes is never enough for these things. I wish we had more time to develop the Netflix model. I wonder what happens if you don't have a subscription. So thank you very much to all our panelists. Now we'll go to the question and answer session. We're going to try to do it differently this time. We'll start with the audience. So if anyone has a burning question, we'll alternate between the audience and myself. So I'll give the chance to the audience first. So yes, so please state your name, affiliation, and who the question is directed to, and try to keep it concise. Thank you.
Thank you. Ilona van Brakel from IRV. My question is to Timothy, specifically about thanks for the overview of CEPI, that was very insightful. The question is specifically about the 100-day mission. So if you develop a vaccine and you are limited in the endemic countries that you can use for your efficacy testing, for instance, and those countries do not have strong research capacity for doing a late-stage trial, how does that factor into your 100-day mission?
Makes it complicated.
Exactly.
We present a 100-day mission as an endpoint, but we all know that it's also very complicated, right? Part of the pandemic preparedness, the paradigm shift, is actually to try to figure out those issues, to do live fire exercises, to actually work with countries, to be able to get through some of these problems and have creative solutions. And it's a learning environment. I can tell you that just the hundreds of lessons we're learning just doing these live fire exercise. Just having sequences transferred to LMIC manufacturers requires 30 to 60 days of approval process, especially if it's a special pathogen. We have to resolve those kind of issues. So, your point's a very good one. These are problem-solving things that we need to find solutions for, obviously.
Thank you very much for the question and the response. The next opportunity to ask a question is mine, and I'll ask Lois. She's online, so we might not get a chance to interact with her after this. So, Lois, you shared all the the challenges with the regulatory processes in Africa, and hopefully AMA and all the regulatory harmonization efforts will help. But until we have this in place, what can your organization do to support, for example, Japanese institutions that want to get regulatory approval in Africa?
Thank you so much for the question. I hope you can hear me. In terms of accessing regulatory approval, I think there are a couple of things that Japanese organization or manufacturers need to take into consideration. Market Access Africa can assist with a few of these things, which include building and developing a good commercialization strategy on the continent, and also narrowing down target countries that will make sense for regulatory approval, especially when you're looking for speed and being able to register quickly. The other opportunity would be we have an access to a wide range of key stakeholders on the continent, and I've had a lot of success in assisting them being able to assist with registration, for example, networks within regulatory authorities. This usually helps to expedite access to those regulatory pathways. Also the regulatory strategic thinking in terms of taking advantage the regulatory harmonization, the mutual recognition pathways, so that instead of targeting maybe the national pathway, it may be advantageous to target a regional pathway where you have access to more countries than just the national pathway. And so there are many different ways to get on the continent. It's building a good strategy, having that good network of stakeholders that can assist on the pathway there, and then just meeting all of the requirements that are according to the WHO global benchmarking in terms of registration of products and submitting all the necessary information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lois. So she's not here with us, so anyone who wants to get in touch with Market Access Africa, please get in touch with GHIT and we can connect you. The next opportunity is back to the floor. Anyone has a question? If not, I can go again. Okay, so my next question is to Omar. So you mentioned briefly some of the challenges with local manufacturing, but one of the challenges we have come across is the image of the Made in Africa brand. You know, there's an impression that it's low quality, it's fake, and it has to be cheap because it's made in Africa. How do you navigate that and at the same time compete with international brands?
Yeah, thank you, Isaac. So this is a very interesting point. Yeah, so the way we're trying to tackle that is really to be able to, first of all, deliver high quality product. And the way to deliver high quality product is to navigate through the very strong QMS pathway. That's why we chose, for example, to be certified by the British Standard Institution. So if you adhere to certification for ISO 13485 certification, which is the higher standard for IVD, so this gives you an international recognition in terms of the work that you're doing. And the second thing is to, I think, to take your product for external evaluation. This is also important. So the way we did it for COVID-19, at the beginning we were facing the same problem because even the authorities at the beginning were a bit skeptical that we were able to manufacture this product in Senegal and have the same performance as the others. So what we did was to send the product through ECOWAS evaluation because they have reference laboratories where they made an evaluation of the RDT and they found high performance and they compared it to others and then gave recommendation for use of this RDT. So I think this second point is also important because it gives visibility to the quality of your product. The third thing I will say is also maybe more communication with the authorities because what we are doing is quite new, as you might know. So it's important really to do a lot of lobbying to approach the right stakeholders in the States, in different NGOs, and also to make them really know the work that is done, and also really explain the work that is being done with this development of RDTs. Yeah, I think these three key points are essential in order to give a good visibility of the quality of the product that is done.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that response. We have 2 minutes left. Back to the floor. Okay. Back to me. The next question is to Ashley. I have to pick one. So again, you mentioned quite a lot of potential barriers to access. If you were to choose one that you think is key, that needs more attention, what would that be, and what is PATH doing to try to address that?
Well, I think today it's difficult to look beyond one thing, which is the funding. And I think both the funding to ensure availability and accessibility of all these tools that we're developing. I mean, you heard today about all of the progress that's being made in developing new innovations that are specifically targeted to low resource settings. But the question is whether the resources are going to be there to ensure that we can maximize the impact of those tools through procurement and public financing. So I think that would be the key one. We've heard a little bit also about concerns for R&D funding as well, and I think that's a very real concern going forward, the funding that we're going to have to continue this type of work, and I think it means that we're going to have to make smarter decisions with our investments and make sure that we use our money maybe even more wisely than we have in the past. And I do think, and hopefully those of you that have been here through the day have seen the role that PDPs play in ensuring a line of sight to impact all the way from basic research through development and policy and scale up and introduction, that I do think the PDPs can play an important role in ensuring that what are likely to be more limited resources that we have going forward can be used as wisely as possible to maximize impact.
Thank you very much for that response, and I think you've saved 30 seconds for, for Timothy. Last question, Timothy. So the 100-day mission was really started to expedite R&D, but I think the whole concept can also be applied to access and delivery. But there's often a gap between R&D and access and delivery. What would be that one thing that needs to be done in order to close that gap between R&D and access and delivery?
Yeah, I think it's an excellent question, and that gap is so important in terms of being able to meet the 100-day mission. And I think the most important thing is strategic partnerships, I think. CEPI certainly can't do it alone. Developing the strategic partnerships with other programs, including Gavi and Revolving Health, for UNICEF, and working with PAHO and WHO, as well as in-country regulatory agencies, really require a network of collaborative, highly integrated planning and strategies. So I think to fill that gap really requires that type of partnerships to be able to take a vaccine and deliver it into the arms of people. So I think that's really the most important thing. It's the coalition part of the C in CEPI for sure.
Thank you very much for that, and we sorry to the timekeeper for stealing 30 seconds of your time. But unfortunately, we have to come to an end of this session, and we don't want to be the panel that stops people from enjoying the reception. So thank you again to our panelists. Please grab them for more questions at the reception. Thank you. Back to you.
Okay, so thank you very much for all the participants and also speakers for making this forum very successful. Actually, all the purposes of this forum are kind of achieved, but I feel some of the very important achievement not yet achieved. Those are real kind of accelerating research and development and innovation. You already kind of updated. You are updated on latest information, and also you expanded that you are networking with others. But the real partnership start from this. Okay, when I was working in a global fund, I came to know that just meeting or just sharing information doesn't make real partnership. Real partnership is really kind of making mechanisms, good mechanisms, and looking at the common goal, but with a shared responsibility and role, right? And what we need is really acceleration. We already learned that the 100-day mission. Also recently, I also visited the CEPI office in London, and I exchanged my views with Richard, the CEO. Actually, that the CEPI is kind of looking at virus, and kind of a scope is still kind of the vaccine. Of course, very, very needed for such kind of prioritization. But when it comes to malaria, TB, NTDs, which really affect 1 billion people, it is not 100 days mission, but 100 years of achievement. We still need better medicine and vaccine for malaria, and of course TB. We need the new vaccines and also medicines. And NTD, we have a lot of kind of diseases waiting for vaccines, medicines, and better diagnostics. That is why we already, learned a lot about the kind of gap, right? So how to accelerate? It is very, very, very important. And it is a really kind of takeaway message to you, how and with whom to, the work together. Today, we actually have, of course, the existing partners, but at the same time, new partners. I found that some of the ventures, even NEC, even Toyota and others, those are also very, very critical. And we need to create a good ecosystem, right? Not just on the R&D, but as you know, sometimes the gap are 4 years, 5 years. In the case of ART, HIV, in 9 years for a gap between that's the product development and access and delivery. Especially I was working in Africa and others, UNICEF and Global Fund. We really need to look at the real kind of human-centered approach. Human-centered or people-centered approach, very easy to say, but what it means, because usually resource-limited areas in Africa, we have a very much limited resources, money, human resources, and supply itself. So sometimes we have to think about, okay, we need the vaccines for malaria, we need medicines for TB, but sometimes we need more kind of comprehensively, like respiratory, the symptomatic kind of taking care, or fever, that care. So sometimes multiplex also need to be developed, and some of the kind of integration or the combination kind of thinking. So innovation is not only product development, right? We have 5 types of innovations. One is, of course, product. Other one is process. Today also we discussed how to expedite the process of regulatory and better the clinical trials. And market, we also need to create demand. And other one is supply, logistics. Of course, we need innovation. And the 5th one is organization or our mindset. Sometimes people feel, okay, we need time, 3 years, 4 years for clinical trials. But we made this pandemic preparedness, this COVID vaccines within 300 days, right? And we are now targeting at 100 days. So why not even neglected tropical diseases, TB, malaria, these existing pandemic or endemic, we also need to expedite. So our mindset also needs to be changed, right? I'm always thinking every day how to just expedite. So please think about that. Maybe this kind of partnership can create such kind of real kind of acceleration and also a kind of direction. So I really thank all of you. First, can we just give hands to all the speakers coming from quite a long way from all over the world and Japan. Thank you very much for all the speakers. And also, please give hands to all the participants who create good partnership to expedite and accelerate R&D. And lastly, not least, please give hands to my staff. Actually, GHIT has only 20 people, yeah? But you could see really smart, young, and nice. And they are really kind of working very hard for this one. So thank you very much for this.
GHIT Fund. Fight neglected diseases through partnerships.